Good morning, everyone. Welcome to God's Grace on Thee and Angel Wallace Productions. Today is Thursday. My goodness, the days are going by so fast. It is September the 19th of 2024, and it is now 10:48 a.m. here in Reno, Nevada. It is 59 degrees fair and mostly sunny. We are into fall weather, folks. The evenings are chilly. Okay, so today we're going to commence with chapter 15. So I hope you're all ready to listen to some good information that's coming through. Recording number 1, Sananda, Hatton. Saturday, December 23rd, 1989, 8 o'clock a.m., year 3, Day 129. For those that don't remember who Sananda is, that's his name in the heavens, in the ethers. His name is Jesus here on earth. Hatton is an alien commander from the Galactic Federation and is in assistance to help educate us and direct us when the time is near. So let's get started. Think not that you would not be given the roadmap back to the stars. Creator promised you truth so that you might discern the path. See the evil for that which it is. Change of the thought form, and you can create freedom and that which is of your rightful heritage. You are trapped by the lie, and yet you need only to cast off your bindings. The word of truth shall set you free. There is wondrous solace, tremendous power, and ultimate victory in simply refusing to be deceived. For if enough of you ask passage, the ship shall be sent. United, you will stand, but divided, you are falling, and the purpose has been to turn brother against brother and strip you of your strength. Reach out into your brother. Refuse to accept that which is told to you without discernment of self-truth. Carefully look at all facets and find wisdom. Rise above your physical fears and terrors and come again into life. You have become a humanity of bored, terrified, and truth-starved people. Stand up. Learn the truth. Take thy brother's hand and refuse to accept the lie. It is time to birth the phoenix into a renewed cycle. Will you but sit and wither in the flames and fall into the ashes? You have but to ask and reach out unto my offered hand, for I know the way. I am Sananda. The master schemers. There are several master theoreticians for that which is called the world order movement. Now let us see that which they project. I am Hatton, to sit with you and reason together. Saul Mendelovitz is a leading theoretician regarding this theory. He has stated, I am arguing for a new governance or alternative institutions to those now responsible for global concert. It could easily be the UN with binding decision-making power. People will be demanding a central guidance system. It means a governance is about to come into being in which the policy elites in various nations, state who have the authority and the capacity to make decisions, will not longer solely have that as their prerogative. There will be a governance that will say you can't build an army anymore. You must give a certain amount of your economic income to other areas of the world. Another world order specialist is Richard Falk, a professor of international law at Princeton University. Now, Falk has helped design strategies for bringing the United States under jurisdiction of a coercive global governing authority. We shall quote Richard Falk a lot as we move along through these pages. Mr. Falk is a director of the World Order Models Project, a World Order think tank in New York City. And affiliated with the World Order Institute, WOMP is funded by two giants within the cartel's tax-exempt foundation complex, Rockefeller Foundation and Carnegie Endowment for World Peace. It is significant that early trustees of the Carnegie Endowment included wealthy Wall Street moguls who backed the Bolshevik Revolution. And Richard Falk specifies the target date for completion of the cartel's basic global governing authority. We should like to bring the new system into being by the year 2000 or shortly thereafter. In essence, we anticipate the centralized administration of many realms of human activity: health, environmental protection, money, business operations, ocean and space use, disarmament, disaster relief, peacekeeping and peaceful settlement, and resource conservation. This should begin to give you questioners of dates something to seriously ponder. Harlan Cleveland, a director of the cartel's Aspen Institute for Humanistic Studies, has further described the awesome power for which the cartel is reaching. He said, "There is a long agenda of creative effort just ahead, a complex agenda of international action, which some of us have been calling the planetary bargain. Now we, the people of the world community, will need to create a food source, to assure energy supplies, to depress fertility rates, to stabilize commodity markets, to protect the global environment, to manage the ocean and its deep seabed, to control the modification of weather at human command, to rewrite the rules of trade and investment, to reform the monetary system, to mediate disputes, to reduce the cost of military stalemates, to manage conflict in a world of proliferating weapons, and to keep the peace when it is broken. Taking it all together, this agenda amounts to a third try at world order, the League of Nations having died, and the United Nations unable in its present condition to cope." Dear ones, really carefully read these words. On the surface, they sound wondrously marvelous. There is always enough truth set forth to mislead and misguide. Really see what is said and comprehend the magnitude of such projections, and always look to the resource behind the institutes. Who pays the bills? The ones who control your very existence on that placement. Now, Richard Falk admits that some of the planners working with the World Order Models Project to prepare the foundation of world government are agents of the Soviet Union and Communist China. He is also candid about the eco-political structure of the cartel's evolving global system. He writes, "This transnational group of scholars, therefore, is committed to the search for peace with equity and seeks to involve a globalist ideology that draws on socialism to depict a humane set of economic relationships based on societal well-being." So, you learn on good authority that the world government is to be a socialist entity. The Soviet Communist Party helps you to understand America's future with this definition of socialism. And I quote, "Socialism is a social system under which, as a result of the socialist revolution and the consolidation of the dictatorship of the proletariat, private ownership of the means of production is abolished. Socialist ownership is established as the basis of society, and the exploiting classes are eliminated. Manufactured products are distributed according to the work in line with the principle: he who does not work does not eat. Socialism is the first phase of communism. All of this at first glance looks really good. But who is at the top pulling the strings and making the decisions? Do you have a fair God who is always just, or do you have men who are evil? Freedom is a wondrous thing indeed, and once it is God, it is most difficult to recover, as you ones are going to find out very quickly. Webster's New World Dictionary reports that the founder of modern socialism was German political economist Karl Heinrich Marx, 1818 to 1883. The term socialism is often used interchangeably with the term Marxism. Marx, as a paid agent, wrote the Communist Manifesto, a blueprint for global socialist dictatorship. The manifesto calls for violent revolution, resulting in abolition of all religion and morality, abolition of private property and right of inheritance, government control of education and communication, establishment of a heavy graduated income tax, creation of industrial armies, forced labor, government monopoly on all production, manufacturing, banking, transportation, agriculture, etc. Does any of this sound familiar? If it does not, then go get the Phoenix Journals. The government will take away everything. You can keep that which is yours a bit longer by incorporation, if you can keep secret the ownership of your corporation, and the only place left in the U.S. is Nevada. I warn you, they will take your inheritance and all your assets before they are done, and they plan to be finished by the year 2000. You have, it appears, less than 10 years at best to get your assets covered. So be it. The manifesto demands annihilation of the middle-class owner of property, bourgeois, who must be swept out of the way and made impossible to exist. The manifesto does not demand the annihilation of the super-rich class. In fact, the manifesto expresses empathy with the European aristocracy. How many of you are in the super-rich class? Does this sound like something right out of hell? So be it. The manifesto repeats that the enemy of the communist movement is the enterprising, profit-oriented, freedom-loving bourgeois. The term bourgeois is defined by Webster's New World Dictionary as that economic class between the very wealthy class of idle rich and the drudgery-ridden working poor. So where does that place most of you good old kids? No, dear hearts, this is not some silly plan for someone else, somewhere else. This is the plan for you in the United States of America, and it is all but finished. Karl Marx tried to induce the working poor, proletariat, to despise and destroy the middle class. George Bernard Shaw pointed out, quote, "The working man respects the bourgeois and wants to be the bourgeois. Marx never got hold of him for a moment. Historically, all socialist movements have been financed and directed by the super rich. Why would the world's most powerful, moneyed cliques promote socialism? Because socialism, whether totalitarian or democratic, stratifies citizens into two classes: the powerful rich nomenclature and the working poor. poor. Socialism is a system in which the super rich need not compete with an enterprising middle class for wealth and power, since the middle class has been annihilated by government monopoly on property and means of production. Socialism, which concentrates all wealth and power in the hands of the ruling elite, is a kickback to medieval feudalism. Is it any wonder that Mr. Bush is not jubilant over the breaking away of the peoples of the Soviet bloc in a direction away from socialistic communism? It had been hoped and planned that with Mr. Gorbachev, etc., this could have been pulled off, while still managing to keep those people of Europe under control. Honor your brothers and sisters over there who have given it all to get your attention in time. Please let it be in time. Socialism is a system of masters and slaves. This is why the cartel has selected socialism as the vehicle for seizing total global power. Further defining socialism, Igor Shafarevich, a Russian scientist and dissident residing in the USSR, identifies the central element of socialism. Socialism is the theory of preparing and implementing revolution. It is a series of rules which must be followed in order to seize power. At the same time, it is the technology of power, philosophy of the absolute state to which all life is subjected, i.e., Satanism. Oh, gulp. Oh, gulp. Could it be? You see, you thought those Russians practiced communism. Nay, nay, nay. You simply did not understand socialism. Richard Falk concedes that it is virtually impossible for nations to get rid of the socialist regimes once those regimes adopt a hard orientation toward the retention of state power. But he concludes that socialist forms of authoritarianism are to be preferred to capitalism because socialism seems to do better in the maintenance phase with economic rights and with those human rights concerned with avoidance of extreme abuse of the person. Ah, now you see where you got the conception of socialism being good. It could, if only man were perfect, fair, and just. Now, the year Soviet troops invaded Afghanistan to begin an extermination campaign there, Falk wrote that the Soviet role in the Third World has been less widely detrimental to the pursuit of human rights than has the American role. Such is the twisted bias of those planning America's future in the socialist New World Order global system. The cartel's global governing authority will require a massive bureaucracy, which planners often refer to as a central guidance system. Womps. Blueprint for this governing authority appears to be a refinement of the United Nations organization, which was created by the cartel in the first place as a preparatory foundation for world government. Cartel patrician John Foster Dulles was leader of the delegation which met with the Soviets in San Francisco in 1945 to hammer out the United Nations Charter, and Dulles wrote, I quote, "The United Nations represents not a final stage in the development of world order, but only a primitive stage. Therefore, its primary task is to create the conditions which will make possible a more highly developed organization. If the principal members of the United Nations, including the Soviet Union, are willing to take part in a proposed New World Organization, then the United Nations itself could quickly be made into that organization. Dharma, I pain to see the realization of the people of the lie who have passed your way and sat in judgment and persecution of you ones. It was intended that you never get these words into print for the masses. Those ones work in ignorance of the total evil that they bear upon their fellow men. I warned you to be prepared for the pain and feeling of isolation, for it had to come to be. In their simple truth, they do not conceive of that which they do. When your heart is too heavy, reach out unto Little Crow, for your tasks are hard and painful. But I believe it becomes obvious that you are not alone, and these other brave men do not yet understand that they have the help of we of the outer realms. Hold tightly to my hand, little sparrows, for the winds shall blow against you, but the ultimate storm shall be conquered, and the winds shall but thrust you up. You ones shall be given the strength to prevail and prosper. To conceal the lie, they must allow you the freedom of speech a bit longer. Do you see? They do not yet have total control, and they cannot handle anarchy, and you ones shall walk behind our shields. I hold thee close. Cartel planner Richard Gardner, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and Professor of Law at Columbia University, brings us up to date on the development of world government. A generation ago, the central problem was to create new global institutions where none existed. Today, it is to get several hundred functional and regional commissions, boards, committees, and secretariats to work together effectively. It is to these hundreds of international commissions, boards, and secretariats that nations of the world are gradually handing the power to govern, the power to make binding decisions, the power to determine the course of human history. The most pressing problem, says Gardner, is how to improve present arrangements for creating, adapting, interpreting, and enforcing international law. So the cartel continually inserts into the United Nations framework new and powerful intermediary groups of administrators who behind the scenes guide the developing global bureaucracy. Gardner notes, while the membership explosion of the UN system makes it politically impossible to return completely to the old ways of doing things, the common interest of all countries in the orderly development of new rules of international law suggests that greater use of small and expert bodies should be made in the preparatory stage of lawmaking conferences. Now, this year you have seen the power put forth in demonstrations for the UN group. When the U.S. had not paid their dues, most intentional a display indeed. The organization all but had to disband. It was a most obvious show of power, and none but you of the blind, trusting public citizens missed it. Go against the power wielder and you reap the sword of doom for your nations who rise to dispute. The world is already hostage to the evil cartel. And as the cartel's global socialist bureaucracy becomes incrementally the governing power of the entire earth, all national governments will, according to Richard Falk, wither away. In the order to hasten the withering process, Cartel propagandists such as Zbigniew Brzezinski, former national security advisor under President Carter, instruct Americans that national sovereignty and nationalism are dangerous and selfish and antiquated concepts. National sovereignty is defined as the right of a nation to conduct domestic and foreign policy without outside interference. And such independence is absolutely inimical to socialist world order. As V.I. Lenin declared, Marxism cannot be reconciled with nationalism, even if the latter is just irreproachable and civilized. Marxism is moving forward ahead of every national and international idea, putting the idea of the amalgamation of all nations into a higher one. The Communist Party of the Soviet Union affirms, nationalism is harmful to the common interests of the socialist community, and above all, the people of the country where it remains, since isolation from the socialist camp holds up that country's development, and it deprives it of the advantages deriving from the world socialist system. The plan to harness all nations to a global socialist governing authority would be foiled if America should insist upon the right to make its own political and economic choices. Citizens of the United States would be deprived of bowing to the ultimatums of the world dictator if they cling to the Declaration of Independence, which upholds national sovereignty as the basis of personal liberty. In preparation for the plan, personal liberty must be extinguished for the good of the total group. World Order pioneer George Bernard Shaw explained most eloquently, "We as socialists have nothing to do with liberty. Our message, like Mussolini's, is one of discipline and of service. Wean the Americans from liberty." In order to wean Americans from the concept of liberty, the cartel has created a new document to replace the Declaration of Independence. This new document is called Declaration of Interdependence, written by cartel agent Henry Steele Commager in 1975, and signed by 114 congressmen and senators in 1976, and it reads, 2 centuries ago, our forefathers brought forth a new nation. Now we must join with others to bring forth a new world order. We affirm that the economy of all nations is a seamless web, and that no one nation can any longer effectively maintain its processes of production and monetary systems without recognizing the necessity for collaborative regulation by international authorities. We call upon all nations to strengthen and to sustain the United Nations and its specialized agencies and other institutions of world order, and to broaden the jurisdiction of the World Court. Well, this militant call for world order is diametrically opposite the fierce spirit of liberty, which broke the back of tyranny and swept the United States to independence 200 years ago. The Declaration of Interdependence is the absolute antithesis of 18th century sentiment, which inspired George Washington to admonish in his farewell address. I quote, "The great rule of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations is, in extending our commercial relations, to have with them as little political connection as possible. The cartel detests America's original Constitution, that venerable old document which has protected personal liberty for 200 years. Zygmunt Brzezinski, co-founder of David Rockefeller's Trilateral Commission, calls for constitutional reform and for a constitutional convention to re-examine the nation's formal institutional framework. And Brzezinski writes, Marxism represents a further vital and creative stage in the maturing of man's universal vision. Marxism is simultaneously a victory of the external, active man over the inner, passive man, and a victory of reason over belief, and it postulates the absolute capacity of man to truly understand his reality as a point of departure for his active endeavors to shape it. It has been Marxism that has served to stir the mind and to mobilize human energies purposely. The Constitution, as written by the Founding Fathers, obstructs global Marxists' dictatorship because it declares the government derives authority only from the consent of the people, who are the supreme in power, rank, and authority. How many of you people got to decide whether or not to invade Panama or send business ambassadors into China? Constitution is a further impediment to the plan because it limits power by dividing it among several governing entities, federal, state, and local. Thomas Jefferson warned that if the federal government should become the center of all power, it would become as venal and oppressive as the government from which we separated. He expressed the basic sentiment of the Founding Fathers when he said, "The way to have good and safe government is to not trust it all to the one, but to divide it among the many." What has destroyed liberty and rights of man in every government which has ever existed under the sun? The generalizing and concentrating all cares and powers into one body. It is not difficult to imagine what Jefferson would say about entrusting all the governing power in the world to the nameless, faceless, unelected bureaucrats of the United Nations. The cartel's opinion of Jefferson was articulated by Arthur Schlesinger, who as assistant to President Kennedy called for the gradual advance of socialism in the United States through a series of New Deals. Now, Schlesinger declared Jefferson is today remote and irrelevant, a figure, not a present concern, but a historical curiosity, unchallengeable power. The cartel wants nothing less than unchallengeable power, concentrated in a global federal government. Thus, Senator Joseph S. Clark complained on behalf of the Ford Foundation. We have inherited from our forefathers a government structure which so divides power that effective dealing with economic problems is cumbersome. They were right in their day, but they are wrong in ours. Surely we have reached the point where we can say Jefferson was wrong, that government is not best which governs least. The cartel finds that America's legislative branch of government is an obstruction to unbridled executive power. Senator Clark also wrote, "I have no hesitation in stating my deep conviction that the legislatures of America, local, state, and national, are presently the greatest menace to the successful operation of the democratic process. The executive should be strengthened at the expense of the legislature." That is not to say that the cartel dislikes democracy. Democracy defined as a mobocracy. demagoguery, and unrestrained tyranny by the manipulated majority, which leads to chaos, anarchy, and finally dictatorship. In a pure democracy, only the majority has a voice. The minority is crushed by the furor of prevailing passion. The minority goes unheard and unprotected. A lynch mob is pure democracy. Democracy is necessary for implementation of the plan. Now, the founding fathers of the Constitution were champions of the Republican form of government, which protects the rights of not only the majority, but also those of the minority. Because Alexander Hamilton understood that there is no theoretical limit upon the power of a majority which is determined to impose its will upon a weaker minority. He warned, "If we incline too much to democracy, we shall soon shoot into a monarchy or some other form of dictatorship." James Madison, the father of the Constitution, agreed. He is famous for this commentary. Quote, "Democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security of the rights of property, and have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths." And this is why the U.S. Constitution makes no mentions of democracy. It guarantees each of the states a republican form of government. The cartel socialist global authority, on the other hand, will provide what Lenin called a complete democracy. That is, a socialist dictatorship by elites who refer to themselves as the people. The Soviets explain, "As for socialist democracy, it is not directionless democracy, but directed democracy, i.e., democracy directed by the party and the state in the interest of the further development of socialism and the building of communism." Now, this is stated by the communists straightforwardly and openly. Let us allow these things to begin the process of soaking in Dharma. You and Oberly take a break from this hill today. Get away for a few hours. We can pick this up later today. Let there not be fear, Chela, for fear clouds the senses. There's a whole nation, nay, the world of people waiting to stand with truth. Intimidation is the name of the evil game, ruled by fear. I have you closely bound in protection. Now, we must protect those who allowed us this opportunity. And the way we do that is to get these documents circulating as quickly as is possible. Let us always keep protection of our brothers uppermost in mind. God keep you, Chelas. I now move to standby. You never leave our care. I am Hatton to clear circuit. Out.